I'm Steve Wilkerson, and I'm with Jim Saunders, Executive Editor of the News Service of Florida. Jim, the special session on congressional redistricting concluded without a decision, without a map. What's going to happen?
This was going to be the easy one, at least we thought. They're going to have two special. They were going to have two special sessions, one to draw congressional districts and one to draw state Senate districts. And we thought the congressional one would be easier, but it fell apart. So
well, I got to ask you this. You've been following this issue and you've been following the legislature for a while. Did you expect that they would go through this process and get to the end and just not even vote out a map?
I did not see that coming until the last morning, really. I figured that they would be able to pull it together and get something done. The Supreme Court in July ruled that congressional districts were unconstitutional. They violated the Fair Districts Amendments, which are aimed at preventing gerrymandering. But the Supreme Court also gave very specific directions about what it thought needed to happen to make the map constitutional. So I think a lot of other people went into this session or watching this session thought, that they'd take the Supreme Court decision and be able to come up to an agreement on a new map, and they'd get it out of there. There was tension and turmoil a little bit back and forth during the session, but at the end it all just blew up. And so the Senate wanted to. They talked about things like extending the special session for another 4 days. They talked about having a conference committee, which is a formal negotiating process. And the House wouldn't go along, and at noon on Friday, they all went home. So I didn't see it coming. I don't think a lot of people saw it coming, and I don't think it bodes well for the Senate redistricting session that's going to be coming up.
Well, there were a lot of personalities involved in this. There always are. The House pretty much took the map that would have resulted from the court's deliberations. There was something called a base map floating around that was based on the court's decision. But the Senate wanted to make some changes, right, in that map.
The House stuck pretty closely to what at least their interpretation was of what the Supreme Court had ordered. Staff members took what the Supreme Court ordered, put together this base map. The Senate also had that base map as a starting point going into this session, but they made a couple significant changes that involved, that were pushed by Senate Appropriations Chairman Tom Lee primarily. He's a very influential senator, former Senate president, and also had the support, these changes had the support of the majority leader of the Senate, Bill Galvano, who was also the chairman of the Reapportionment Committee. So they made a couple changes, one of which had some support in the House as well, which would have made a district in which Sarasota County would have been all in one district. Under the base map, Sarasota County would get divided in two. So, the Senate wanted to put Sarasota County all in one district. The more contentious issue came because Lee wanted eastern Hillsborough County to essentially be in one district, instead of being carved up, Hillsborough County being carved up into so many other districts. And Lee pushed really hard for that. But in doing so, I mean, you've got to think about these congressional maps. You change one line, it changes other lines down the road. And it even would have had an impact, a fairly substantial impact on Orange County, which is, two or three counties away from the changes they were making in Hillsborough County. The House really objected, it seemed to me, to those changes. But I also think you have to step back a little bit. I mean, the regular legislative session in April just blew apart because they couldn't reach agreement on health care and budget issues. The House went home 3 days early. So I think there's a lot of overhang from that. There was a lot of ill will at that point. And, we got into this session, the Senate started making changes. The House didn't want to make changes. The House's position was, hey, this base map, we think we can get that by the Supreme Court. We need to stick by it. And the Senate started, making changes. And some of the ill will kind of flared again. Probably the best example is that Bill Galvano, the majority leader, got up and stormed out of a public meeting that was being held with Jose Oliva, who's the House redistricting chairman. You know, Galvano is a very measured, usually relatively soft-spoken guy, and he got so mad that he walked out of this meeting. So, you know, it's clear there's a lot of personalities involved, at least it seems to me.
Well, where does this issue go from here? Back to the courts, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, the courts are going to have to, you know, sort this out unless there's some, you know, something we don't see on the horizon about the legislature coming back and doing it. But Supreme Court has ordered, you know, has said that there's at least 8, or they found 8 districts that were unconstitutional. They said they have to be redrawn. The legislature was supposed to report back to circuit court with a plan. Now the legislature doesn't have a plan to take to them. So, you know, it's going to be up to the courts to you know, determine what these districts look like, which I guess I just don't think that anybody in the legislature really wanted that as an outcome, you know, but that's where we are at this point. It's a little bit, we all, I think, still have questions about how that process is going to play out, but that's the direction it's heading.